and let me introduce our panelists one by one. So we have dear Steve here, who has just talked to you about the time flow and the command and control. We have Zohair Saif. He is the head of innovation from United Bank Limited, a prominent bank from Pakistan. So welcome, Zohair. Thank you for joining us today. We have Amol Pradhan, who is the Global Capability and Enterprise Agility Lead at IBM. He heads the global team of agile practitioners across IBM. Welcome, Amol, for the panel discussion. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sandeep. Glad to be
And
here
then,
with you.
thank you. And then we have Brittney Gray. She has been a part of the core team member. That's how I would like to introduce her first. And then she is the regional lead, ASEAN regional lead for agile transformation at Standard Chartered Bank. So welcome, Brittney, to the panel discussion. Thank you for agreeing to share your thoughts as an expert on this group as well. So let's get started. And the format of the panel discussion, just to give brief of how did we source the questions. This is all the amalgamation of the emails that I have been getting from various people on the manifesto, the LinkedIn messages, as well as we crowdsourced from the core group. So I'll be posting some of the questions that I already have, and then feel free. The audience also can basically put it on chat and our Slack group if you have additional questions. So we shall start with let's start it with Zohair. Um, so one of the question I've been continuously getting, especially after the COVID era, is the future of work is really hybrid, or do you see the future of work as pure remote or pure we will go back to working from office?
So that's an interesting question, right? And the internet is ablaze with this question and a lot of people's opinions, right? A lot of people who earn 10 times what I earn. But if I had the perfect answer to give, right, I'd also get a very hefty bonus. But where I see it really at this stage is uh, I firmly believe that hybrid work is here to stay. COVID has really fast tracked us in accepting that hybrid work and remote work is acceptable for several organizations and companies, especially in Pakistan. It was something of a reaction. How can you work remotely? How can we be sure that somebody's working and not fooling off, right? And it has come to believe that it did actually work, um, and the value stream was there. So if hybrid work weren't to be here, then we'd have a lot of problems in the future. My gut sense is that it's here to stay, and in fact, my second gut sense is that now's the time to start enabling even further. So it should simply be wherever people are, enable them, empower them, get them connected, and your value stream will not be disrupted.
Thank you. That's insightful, Zohair. Okay, let's go on to the round. Okay, what do you think, Amol? Is hybrid work, in your view, working with different clients, what do you see happening in the industry?
Hybrid around Sandeep, remote versus face to face.
Yes, remote versus face to face.
I think last year was quite interesting, and we have worked with Zohair quite a lot in the last year. So it's I would say like face to face training. Of course, everyone is missing, but remote having the one channel is helpful. I mean, everyone is remotely is still quite powerful, I would say, right? The only challenge we face where there are a lot of introverts who don't want to enable the cameras, you face the real issue to connect, whether the people are still there or are they enjoying coffee or on the WhatsApp or email, you are clueless completely, right? So I think with that just one challenge, I would say it was extremely powerful. And when some people were into the face-to-face in the previous world pre-COVID, like bit of remote, hybrid and bit of remote, face-to-face and remote, it was more challenging. Are you going to look at the people in front of you or onto the laptop, right? So I think one forum having either face-to-face or fully remote, from my perspective, it is still, we managed to launch almost 9 large transformations in the last year. So yeah, we miss the coffee chat and tea meetups for that informal thing to get the things moving. Right now, we need to find, hey, Zohair, do you have time for a few minutes and book the calendars, right? That really slows down sometimes, right? If we are there in the office, and if I see, oh, it's just walking for the coffee or water, just go there, right? And have a quick chat, 1 minute. Now we need to just wait. Hey, Raj, when are you free? And we just wait maybe one day in that itself, right?
Fair point. Thank you, Amol. And Brittney, do
Mm.
you think this, what Amol just mentioned about the enabling the camera part, or basically being upfront and open, do you think the cultural boundaries also play a role there?
Great question, Sandeep. I think yes, there are definitely cultural boundaries in respect to people's comfort level, but I think more than that, and there's been recent studies on this, Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and managing that is really important as well. So I think there's got to be balance, and hybrid is the right way to describe it. If we are going to be working remotely from one another, we do need to be thinking about what that looks like and having discussions around, okay, what are the social norms now that we are in a hybrid environment? I think there's leaders across the board working tirelessly to do that, not only to have enabled a hybrid working environment. I think that's one thing we should really be celebrating still, but also continuously innovate and make sure that people are clear on the boundaries, the ways of working, and how we manage the real issue of today, which is Zoom fatigue and 24/7 availability.
Perfect. And that leads to the next, question that came. Like, for example, based on this remote working, right? People have kind of forgot, not blurred, the boundaries between personal and work life. So, Steve, what do you think? This fatigue. How can we tame the flow of this fatigue of work versus life balance?
Well, I can tell you that now I mentioned before the story of Borland. Borland was probably one of the very first companies that worked in a distributed way internationally, sending files over dial-up modems in the late 80s. Those modems that make those funny noises that you see only on films nowadays. But that was a revealing experience for me as well, because we learned to work and coordinate and synchronize through a channel that had a very, very tight bandwidth. So it was expensive to move data around. We didn't have Zoom and video and now like a picture that is taken on your smartphone has as much data as the whole data center of a company had back then. So that taught us to be parsimonious in the economy of the exchange of information. And that is also one thing that I teach all the way, not only in the current setting of COVID and forced remote work, but ordinarily when people are actually in a built environment, shared space. The idea that I promote is what I call management by exception, where the state of the work will call for meetings when necessary. In short, the idea of having a common enemy that brings all the people together materializes through these work execution signals that tell us, oh, now we need to have a meeting. We said, Brittney just mentioned Zoom fatigue, but I think in many companies, ordinarily, without this strained COVID situation, there is meeting fatigue. One of my philosophies is let people work, don't bother them. They know what to do. and just give them the means to come together when there is a problem, and the problems will get resolved. So when you get into this habit of having meetings day in, day out, at the end, they become mechanical. People disengage. Even if they are face to face, there are no collocated minds. They're like zombies. So I think that's a huge lesson to take home. Try to create working methods where the state of the work will guide you in what kind of interaction and communication is needed. Then, if that is over Zoom or just across a whiteboard, it really doesn't matter. It's the attitude and the behavior that you build around that situation.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. And Frank, you have a point, and you made a very good point there, that our decision velocity has basically reduced by doing this hybrid work. So do you wanted to share any thoughts on that, Frank?
Oh yeah, I'm running a large transformation at the moment, and yeah, working from home has made it much harder to do than having those ideation sessions or those where we set a common purpose. We talked about it. That's much harder to do over Zoom. I find personally, I'm very old-fashioned, I think, but. So every decision we need to make, it needs to involve 5 people and 3 different meetings, like what Stephen just talked about. And that is what I see happening. Instead of having the cooler conversations and say, yeah, we go left or we go right today, we make a decision and we go. It takes 3 half-an-hour sessions over Zoom.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So very similar to what the next, taking this to the next level, right? So now when we talk about the methods, practices, and tools about working remotely, now taking this to a little deeper level. When you talk about these purpose-driven organizations, and now when we look at the world around you, where you kind of distribute this purpose in different pockets and chunks across the globe now, right? So your army or your, I don't know if the zombies is the right word, which is Steve just used. So, but so you have those zombies, like, I mean, you have those blueies and the greenies and the redies of, these herbies in your company, right? Those personas and personalities are not going away anywhere. So how do you really create this kind of, purpose-driven organization? And we will start with Zohair. So what do you think, Zohair? What should we be doing to make sure our purpose is still at the center of everything we do?
I think taking the lead from where Steve and Frank what they've been talking about, right? Trust is the cornerstone of every decisioning, right? How do you create that delivery value is by empowering and trusting the scope amongst your operational people, right? The middle managers, really, they're the ones driving really day in, day out, and that's the important fact, right? Have we empowered the middle managers enough for them to take the decision, for them to move forward rather than wait for a meeting to be scheduled, for a decision to be taken, and then in response to that, not use up a delivery capacity in time for it, right? The second bit, in my opinion, is obviously to have a larger than life purpose, right? I mean, one of the examples I'm fond of sharing is back in 2015 when John Deere upgraded their own vision statement. So from a tractor company or a tractor builder, they said, we're going to help feed the world. And that basically connected people throughout the chain, from the top guy to basically the secretary, the reception staff. Everybody was connected to the vision. If I don't do my job, then I will not help feed the world, right? So that basically opened up into a larger purpose that sort of directed towards everybody's effort. And it wasn't as short term as, oh, are we able to deliver and complete this product and service, and can we go to the market by this date so then we can start commercializing the benefit? It was everything was larger than life. And sure, there's a commercial value out of it. I mean, you've got to be commercially successful, and then in response, you're also helping feeding the world. So that's my take on that.
Perfect. And that explains very well. And one of the things that we talk all the time is, you need to always prioritize your profit over purpose. I mean, purpose over profit, but it doesn't mean you will lose your profit, right? You don't need to suddenly become a charitable organization to be purpose driven. Right. So I think that's one thing that we always talk about when it comes to purpose, because this becomes a little philosophical whenever we talk about purpose, right? But purpose doesn't mean you suddenly become and then go on your charity spray and create a democratic chaos. It doesn't mean that. It needs to have a structure, a balance, and discipline. So thank you, Zohair, for sharing that. So building on top of it, Amol, in terms of the purpose, right? Given that there is a lot of fear now, right? I mean, when people are working from home, and you see you're learning about companies which are closing off. There are people who are being laid off, right? So there is this inherent fear, right? That to build upon the statement that Zohair made, right? If I don't do my work, will I be get laid off? Or if I just take 2 days leave, will I have a repercussion on that? So that kind of environment where fear is the primary factor or primary motivator, how do you build psychological safety?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much valid point, and especially in this virtual world, you have no idea who is going to text you and what channel. Like, is it going to be on the Zoom, Slack, or WhatsApp, or Slack, or email? And I mean, I have seen like team feels like they need to respond quickly, otherwise you may be seen as you're not working. You're at home, and why you're not working? I mean, responding over the weekend as well. You're not traveling, right? So I think it's more about um, clear communication. I would say is honest communication. Um, uh, that yeah, everyone deserves this break, right? I mean, everyone must rather take. There is more stressful, I think. So while it is more stressful, everybody should spend some time on their self healing. And simple thing is like gym is more critical than ever before. But we feel like, oh, should I take a walk, like, or should I just continue because I have so many emails or messages? A simple choice as a day-to-day choice I was facing last year, and yeah, I have lost a little bit physical agility, right, with that, and now I'm trying to get back. Like I must do something right about this. So clear communication, honest communication, and from team perspective, being in touch, understand the interior of the team is quite important. What's going on? Because we are not meeting every day, and so talking and being in touch is quite important. And overall about this fear of firing, I think leaders has even greater responsibility than before to be more transparent about communication. So clear communications and honest about reiterating that every organization is still going through the change. Pandemic is not stopping that. So even though there is organizations going through change, what it means to our team. If you just clarify this change is still positive, doesn't change. I mean, if just that simple statement I found quite helpful. Like this change, yes, our dynamics are changing. My manager is changing, for example, still it is a good change for us. And I think these few things, I think, help from my experience at least.
Thank you, Amol, for sharing that. So building on top of it, right, it seems leadership has a greater responsibility in this new normal, right? I mean, more than what they used to do. Obviously, we all basically talk about leadership, and then everybody comes up with their own leadership framework and give you 10 or 20 different blocks and say, you need to do all this. And then as a leader, when you look at those blocks, I mean, sometimes your mind shuts all together, because if you need to do all that, then what exactly you're talking me to do? You're asking me to be a superhero or what, right? At the end of the day, a leader is also human, right? And one thing which I talk about in my manifesto is that empathy and trust, right? When we talk about psychological safety, it's not just about the teams, right? So we always kind of keep the leader out of the equation when we talk about psychological safety. But how should we create a psychological safe environment where leaders is also inclusive, right? It's an inclusive culture where everybody feels the safety and trust across the organization. What do you think, Brittney? Do you have any thoughts on that psychological safety for leaders?
Yeah, I think psychological safety is important to model in the leadership team as much as it is to anyone that you work with day to day. You need to give them an opportunity to fail fast, and or not even fail. It's learning and acknowledging and celebrating that they are showing vulnerability or that they don't know something. I also think in this day and age where we are distributed, psychological safety comes out of, and what leaders can do to support it is over communicate the message. I've even seen recently there's a trend to put the objective in the background. You know, what is the vision statement, and have it as your background when you're talking to your teams. And don't assume that everybody knows what acronym you're talking about or what is going on. It's okay to over communicate and allow people to ask questions and field them and celebrate that they've asked that question and taken the courage to do so. Another important piece of it, though, is that if we see behaviors in opposition to generating and facilitating psychological safety, making sure it's addressed in a timely manner and in a respectful manner. I think if we don't demonstrate the ability to not just try and create an environment of psychological safety, but also address behaviors that are in opposition to that, then we won't move forward on that matter.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brittney. So I think in one of the last slides of my manifesto, I think I talked about that, talking is easy, doing is hard, and sustaining is harder. So I'll go with the hardest point and the question to Steve. So on this leadership topic, right, you have been involved into different transformations and in different geographies, different leaders. So what Brittney just highlighted, and building on top of what Zohair and Amol said, that leaders have a broader role and more broader responsibilities now. So how do you sustain this? I mean, as a leader, I can learn it. I can learn the tricks of the game, and then I can be, I can talk through it. Maybe I can do it for 3 months. I can do it for 4 months. But then, how do I do it on a continuous basis? What is the way to really sustain it? Over to you, Steve. You are on mute.
Hello. Am I on?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent question, and I think it needs to be framed in this context of knowledge work becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, even a farmer in his tractor today is a knowledge worker. When you have knowledge work, you cannot have leaders. It's a contradiction. Because any decision must be made by the individual who has the deepest or most relevant knowledge in that context for that problem. And therefore, the leadership model must evolve. We heard before about flattening the organization. I think even that is not enough. We are going towards a situation where the organization is decentralized, not only because we are geographically in a diversity of places divided by space, but also because the knowledge that is needed to make a decision moves around depending on context. It keeps on moving maybe several times a day, depending on what the decision is. So we need to be able to recognize acts of leadership rather than leadership roles. People that step up to make the decision. Why? Well, because they know. No one else can know it. No one else can do it, which of course creates some sort of challenge for those who are sitting in conventional management, executive leadership roles. But I think it's just a matter of time that company structures will become decentralized. There will be, of course, a formal hierarchy, as often is required by law, by regulations, by convention. But the way things are done, the ways things are decided, becomes decentralized. And when you have decentralization, you have many other things that become absolutely essential. I mean, the ability to delegate the decision making to someone who knows more, the ability to collaborate, to communicate. Like our initial exercise didn't go well because we did not communicate a lot. Maybe we didn't even know that we were allowed to communicate. So setting up the preconditions, the way people interact and even dynamically in course of discourse change the leader. And when people are making decisions together, it becomes collective leadership. And that's something that like boggles the mind, because a leader is typically one individual, and by definition, a leader has followers. But here we are setting the path in a more collegial way, not because there is some social political agenda, as often is the case when you use these words like community, collegiality, and so on, but because the nature of knowledge work makes that a necessity. You cannot be competitive unless you work together.
Absolutely. I think that's and the way I generally describe this in a single liner, Steve, to all the leaders, that generally leadership do not have a fixed destination. More, all of us can be the leaders. So really +1 for that. So thank you very much for sharing that insights. I have one more topic that is very near to what we are discussing in terms of the new normal, right? So, and I think in the keynote session, Paul exactly talked about the city of New York, like where you have this real estate prices, the most expensive city in the world, right, from a real estate perspective, and how things are shaping out now, right? So in terms of when we talk about the real estate for the companies now that people are working, so how do you see this transition of when people are not going to office? What kind of things the company can do to make these office spaces relevant, use them, right? Because if every company starts to release them, then somebody else have to still basically look out for those spaces and maintain them and keep it. Because if they becomes warehouses of something, then we lose the purpose of being central in the city, because most of these are in the central business districts of the cities, right? So what are some of the things you are seeing, or you would like to see happening for this hybrid way of working, for especially in perspective of the real estate? And we start with Zohair.
So, a couple of years back, when I had much less gray hair, right? So I was with Citibank at that time, and Citibank introduced this concept of hub and spoke, where they would introduce sales distribution centers as spokes, and they would create these very small sort of LG centers where people could just go in, complete applications, submit stuff, organize some very quick sales meetings in the region and district, and go on about doing about this stuff. The purpose was, we needed to be agile at that time in that sense, and so instead of creating these really big centers of training and sales outlets, we said, you know what, we'll occupy these very small retail spaces wherever business or customers are, and so therefore that hub and spoke model created. And I'm foreseeing something similar happen in larger organizations, right? More of these spokes to sort of spring up wherever people are, wherever customers are, wherever employees are, for them to utilize this rather than access the larger sort of the larger real estates in the central offices. Now, coming on to the central offices, right? So we've got some fantastic office sites in Karachi, overlooking the sea, and we think, what can we do with it, right? So some designers may not be coming in day out. The developers may not be coming in. The product owners sometimes are working from home because of the COVID breakout. So what do we do? So we said, why not open the setup up for the larger organization and not just the design team, right? So make use of that setup for people to organize customer meetings, right? The other element that we discussed with some of our incubation centers in Pakistan was to allow non sort of entrepreneurial incubators to come and utilize this facility and sort of have access to an infrastructure which would actually cost them a lot of money. Now, our ask is pretty simple. We say, you come and consume our facility, but share with us what good work you're up to, right? And see if we can mentor you, if we can guide you, if we can expand you. So that's my sort of gut sense on how we're going to be consuming real estate.
Okay, so so the model that you just described, Zohair, right? So you don't need the piece of the pie, but you want to see how the pie looks at least.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right. So over to Amol then, in case, right? So what do you think, Amol? What could be a good use of this office spaces, which might not be filled if the hybrid continues to be the norm?
Zohair has answered pretty well, I think, Sandeep. I can only imagine, like, for example, the large banks, right, who are still not filling up, but I can see the startups are still quite collaborating, at least in Singapore, I can say. People are really still collaborating and co-locating here. So I think this could be the opportunity for, I just referred to large bank because I can see a lot of fintechs and insurance techs are rising here. The Singapore government is like sponsored like anything, like match to match dollar to start your startups.
Really, yeah, really, Shen. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So I think in that case, like this is a fantastic opportunity for startup, the large companies to give the spaces for startups, and that could be a great opportunity to avoid the fear, start collaborating and acquisitions. Right, is a good partnership start, I would say.
Perfect. And Frank, you position something right in Australia. They are used for housing. Can you elaborate on more? Is it they look at? I mean, it is open for all or for a specific like background of people, or there is an income bar, or how do they choose who can then reside in those kind of, and then how do they take care of this? I mean, I would say remodeling the space, because those spaces are not built for living, right? I mean, those spaces are built for working. So how do they do this?
Now they do this in Sydney and Melbourne at the moment. They have repurposed some floors of some buildings and they turn them into apartments to live in. Yeah, of course that's a big investment, but they believe that that is a better investment than commercial real estate at the moment, which is. And the other thing we see in Australia here, because we are almost, we don't have any, or not any, we have less COVID issues than the rest of the world, I guess. So we see a lot of people moving out of Melbourne and Sydney into regional areas. And I think that is because nobody wants to live in a $2 million apartment in Melbourne where they can live in a $1 million apartment on the Sunshine Coast, if you know what I mean, overlooking the ocean. So we see a lot of migration out of big cities to make more use of that hybrid way of working. Yeah, so they, and I see like hubs, like what we talked about before. They will have hubs in those other areas like Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, because people want to live there. Yeah, and we want to exodus in of business people, I should say, in CBDs.
Perfect. I think that's quite innovative way of looking at it. So thank you for sharing that. So that sums up, my question. So I would like to thank all our panelists for joining us today, and all the participants as well who have been very generous with supporting the questions as well as providing more insights around those questions and what is happening across the globe. And that again brings me to the same point that at the end of the day, it's no one owns it all. It's the community who enriches each other, who enriches our knowledge and broadens our area. So when I look at today's session overall, right, from 5 p.m. since I joined, I can very well say that I can skip reading at least 5 to 6 books now. So you saved me a lot of hours today. So a lot of wisdom and golden nuggets out there. So thank you for sharing all that information and knowledge with us. So really. And with that, we are now moving into the closure of our event for today. So one thing is, tomorrow we have an action-packed agenda again. So we have Shane, who is doing our keynote on ethics of agile coaching. This is something that I am really passionate about, given that agile coaching has been at the forefront for almost now a decade over or so, and it is continuously growing. So, and this is, I think, high time to kind of make a dent to the industrial nexus that we are heading towards with the overall coaching models, and the code of ethics cannot be more timely than this. So that's the first thing that we are going to hear. And then we are going to hear about the SustainAgility trio from Amol Pradhan, where how can we basically use it to create more successful transformation and sustainable transformations. And then followed by a panel discussion where experts from other companies will join us. And then we will have a quick celebration to look at the first happy birthday of the manifesto towards the end of the conference. So I look forward to having you all tomorrow as well, joining us and blessing the event and sharing with the community. So thank you very much once again, everybody, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all for organizing. Great work.
Thanks,
No more
everyone.
Boggle tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
No Boggle. Tomorrow is a different one, Frank. So yeah,
No
I forgot
Boggle.
to mention, tomorrow Raj has a different game. So do join us for that. It's not Boggle anymore.
See you
Thanks,
all.
Berg.
Thank you.
All right.
Good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Lovely to meet you too. Bye.